My fiancée looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Before we get married, I want a prenup that protects everything I earn. If this marriage ever ends, I don't want to lose a single dollar." I didn't argue. I simply told her, "Go ahead. Draw up whatever agreement you want." She walked away convinced she'd won that conversation. But a few months later, while sitting in her attorney's office, she discovered a clause she'd completely overlooked. The moment her lawyer explained it, the expression on her face shifted from confidence to pure panic. "My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and about 6 months ago my fiancé insisted on a prenup that would shield every penny she owned." What she never realized was that I'd been quietly building something far more valuable than she ever imagined. The day her attorney finally explained exactly what she'd signed, she realized her plan to protect herself from me had blown up in her own face. Lauren and I had been together for 2 years, and we'd been engaged for 4 months. We first met at a friend's wedding when I was 32 and she was 30. She worked in pharmaceutical sales and earned great money, around $150,000 a year once bonuses were included. She was incredibly ambitious, always talking about climbing the corporate ladder, reaching new financial goals, and planning her next career move. At first, I admired that drive. To me, ambition has always been an attractive quality. I work in the tech industry, although probably not in the way most people picture it. I'm a software architect with a steady salary of about $140,000 a year. It's a comfortable living, but nothing flashy enough to impress people at first glance. What Lauren never knew, mainly because I never felt the need to brag about it, was that I'd spent the previous 6 years building a business on the side. During nights and weekends, I developed a SaaS platform that started as nothing more than a personal hobby. Little by little, it grew into a real company. By the time we got engaged, that platform was bringing in roughly $400,000 a year in revenue, while costing very little to operate. Instead of paying myself a huge salary, I quietly reinvested almost everything back into the business and focused on long-term growth. I lived a simple lifestyle, drove a practical car, and never felt the need to show off. That company was my safety net, my retirement plan, and something I'd built from the ground up. I was proud of it, but I didn't see any reason to advertise my success. Lauren knew I had a side project. She'd seen me working on my laptop plenty of evenings and knew I owned a small software company. But she never asked many questions or showed much curiosity about what I was actually building. Her attention stayed on her own career, her own income, and her own financial independence. About 6 months ago, roughly 2 months after we got engaged, Lauren finally brought up the subject of a prenup. We were eating dinner at her apartment, and she'd been unusually quiet for most of the evening. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I need to talk to you about something." I looked up and asked, "Sure. What's going on?" She took a breath before saying, "I've been thinking a lot about our finances, about marriage, and about what happens if things don't work out." I nodded. "Okay. I want us to sign a prenup before the wedding," she continued. "I want legal protection for everything I own and everything I earn. If we ever divorce, I don't want to lose a single cent." I slowly put my fork down. "So you're planning for a divorce before we've even gotten married?" She shook her head. "No, I'm just being realistic. I've worked incredibly hard for everything I have," she said. "I've watched too many friends go through divorces and lose half of what they built. That's not happening to me. That's why I need us to sign a prenup that keeps everything separate. What's mine stays mine, and what's yours stays yours." I looked at her and asked, "So, you don't trust me?" "It has nothing to do with trust," she replied immediately. "It's about protecting myself. This is just smart financial planning." "And what if I don't agree?" She didn't hesitate. "Then I can't marry you. This isn't something I'm willing to compromise on, Ethan. I need that protection." I thought about her ultimatum for maybe 10 seconds before answering. "Fine," I said. "Write up whatever agreement you want. If having a prenup makes you feel secure, then we'll have one." She looked almost shocked by how easily I agreed. "Seriously? You're okay with that?" "Sure," I answered. "If you want our finances completely separate, I'm fine with it. Your money stays yours. And mine stays mine." "Exactly," I replied. "Whatever helps you feel comfortable." She smiled with obvious relief. "Thank you. I know some guys get really offended by this kind of thing, but I just need to protect myself." "I understand," I said. "Have your lawyer prepare the paperwork, and I'll let my attorney review it." She wrapped me in a hug and seemed genuinely happy that the conversation had gone so smoothly. What she didn't realize was that separating our finances didn't bother me at all. If anything, I actually preferred it. About a week later, her attorney emailed over the first draft of the prenup. It was incredibly detailed. 20 pages of legal language basically stating that everything either of us owned before marriage would remain separate. Any income earned during the marriage would stay separate as well. Neither of us could seek alimony, claim the other's retirement accounts, investments, or other assets. The agreement boiled down to one simple idea. You keep what's yours. I'll keep what's mine. I forwarded the document to my attorney, Daniel, the same lawyer I'd trusted with my business contracts over the years. After reading it, he called me. "This is pretty aggressive," he said. "She's asking for complete financial separation." "That's exactly what she wants," I replied. "And you're comfortable signing something like this?" "Completely. Can you add one more clause for me?" "What kind of clause?" "I want language stating that any business or investment owned before the marriage, or started during the marriage, remains the sole property of the person who created it, including all ownership, income, equity, and future value." There was a short pause. "So you want to protect your software company?" "Exactly. If she wants financial protection, I deserve the same. I want to make absolutely sure that any business I own stays completely off limits." "That seems perfectly reasonable," Daniel replied. "I'll add it." "Anything else?" "One more thing." "Go ahead." "I also want a financial disclosure clause. If either one of us hides assets or misrepresents our financial situation, the entire prenup becomes invalid. Full honesty from both sides." Daniel sounded intrigued. "That's an interesting addition. Why include that?" "Because if I'm signing something this strict, I want both of us to be completely transparent about our finances." "Makes sense," he said. "I'll include it. Just remember," he added, "her attorney will have to approve those changes." "She will," I said confidently. "She wants this prenup badly enough that she'll agree to any reasonable revision." Daniel updated the agreement and sent it back to Lauren's attorney. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "My lawyer says your revisions look fine. We can sign everything next week." She'd accepted every change without asking me what any of them actually said. That alone told me exactly how carefully she'd read the document. Her entire focus was on protecting herself. She assumed my revisions were simply my version of the same thing. She wasn't wrong. She just had no idea how much more those clauses actually protected. 3 weeks later, we officially signed the prenup. Both attorneys were present as we initialed every page and signed the final documents. Lauren looked satisfied. More than that, she looked relieved. She believed she'd successfully protected herself from me. What she didn't know was that I'd walked away with exactly the same protection, and I had far more worth protecting than she had ever imagined. Update 1. Our wedding took place 4 months after we signed the prenup. The wedding itself turned out great. We had a beautiful ceremony, a big crowd of family and friends, and an expensive reception that Lauren insisted on paying for herself. She wanted to impress her coworkers and relatives, and she was determined to make every detail perfect. I didn't have a problem with that. It was her money, so it was her decision. Once we were married, we followed the prenup exactly as it was written. We opened a joint account for household bills and each deposited the same amount into it every month. Outside of that account, everything stayed separate. Our salaries, savings, investments, and personal accounts all remained our own. Lauren seemed completely satisfied with that arrangement. Whenever she earned a bonus at work, she'd immediately transfer it into her personal investment account. She never asked about my finances, and she never volunteered much information about hers beyond the basics. We were husband and wife, but financially we lived very independent lives. About 3 months into our marriage, something huge happened. A larger technology company approached me about buying my software business. They didn't purchase the whole company, but they acquired a majority ownership stake. They bought 60% of the business for $8 million. I kept the remaining 40% and agreed to stay involved as a consultant. I didn't tell Lauren the moment the deal closed, not because I was trying to hide it, but because I was still trying to wrap my own head around everything that had happened. I'd spent 6 years building that company, and overnight it had been validated in a way I never imagined. Suddenly there were lawyers to meet with, accountants explaining tax consequences, and major financial decisions about the equity I still owned. Roughly 2 weeks after everything became official, I finally brought it up. We were having dinner at home while Lauren was excitedly telling me about a major sales deal she'd closed at work. That's awesome, I said. I actually have some good news too. She smiled. Oh, what happened? My software company was acquired. She looked up from her plate. Your little side project? Yeah. A tech company bought a majority stake. Oh, that's nice, she said. How much did they pay? $8 million for 60%. She froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth as she stared at me. 8 million. Yeah, I replied. I still own the other 40%, so the company's total valuation came out to around $13 million. My share of the sale was $8 million. You have $8 million? After taxes, it'll be closer to $5 million, I explained. But yes, roughly. She kept staring at me. And you didn't think this was something you should tell me? I am telling you, I said calmly. The deal only closed 2 weeks ago, and I've spent that time working through everything with attorneys and accountants. I could practically see her trying to process what she'd just heard. So you've been secretly running a multi-million-dollar company this whole time. It wasn't a secret, I answered. You knew I owned a software business. You just never asked any questions. Because I thought it was some tiny side hustle, she shot back. I had no idea it was worth millions. It wasn't worth millions when we first met, I explained. It grew over the years. I kept reinvesting the profits and slowly built it into what it is. How long have you known it was worth this much? I honestly didn't know, I admitted. A private company is hard to value until someone actually makes an offer. The acquisition gave us the first real number. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. Well, this changes everything. How does it change anything? I asked. Our financial situation, she answered. The prenup was negotiated based on the income we disclosed. You made it seem like you earned about $140,000 a year. I do earn about $140,000 a year, I replied. That's my salary from my full-time job. The business income is completely separate. And according to the prenup you insisted on, that business belongs entirely to me and can't be claimed by anyone else. You should have told me, she said. Why? I asked. You were the one who wanted complete financial separation. That's exactly what we agreed to. That's not fair. No, I said. It's completely fair. You wanted a prenup that protected everything you earned because you didn't want to lose a single cent if we ever divorced. I signed it. That exact same agreement protects everything I earn, including my business. She didn't have an answer for that. The rest of dinner passed in complete silence, and the atmosphere between us was painfully tense. Update 2. Over the following week, Lauren became more and more upset about the acquisition. She brought it up almost every day. She accused me of hiding my success from her, insisted the prenup needed to be rewritten, and complained that it wasn't fair for me to have access to millions of dollars while she couldn't touch any of it. Every time, I gave her the same answer. I never hid anything. You knew I owned the business. You simply chose not to ask about it. And remember, the prenup you insisted on specifically protects my business income. That was one of the clauses my attorney added, and your lawyer approved it. She shook her head. I didn't read every single detail. I shrugged. That's not really my problem. You wanted the prenup. You hired the lawyer. You reviewed the documents. And then you signed them. Everything about it is legal, and everything about it is fair. We should renegotiate it, she insisted. Why would I agree to that? I asked. The agreement protects both of us equally. You keep everything you earn. I keep everything I earn. That's exactly what you wanted from the beginning. But I didn't know, she argued. Didn't know what? I asked. That my business could actually become successful? That one day it might be worth millions? The truth is, you assumed you'd always make more money than I did. You believed you'd always be the higher earner. And now that reality turned out differently, you're upset. She hated hearing that. Unfortunately for her, it was true. She'd pushed for the prenup because she assumed she needed protection from me. It never crossed her mind that someday I might be the one who needed protection from her. About a month after I told her about the acquisition, Lauren walked through the front door one evening with an announcement. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, she said. I want to review the prenup because I think we may have grounds to change it. Based on what? I asked. Financial disclosure. You didn't properly disclose how much your business was worth. I disclosed that I owned a software company. I reminded her. It was listed in the prenup documents. The company became more valuable after we signed. That isn't misrepresentation. My lawyer believes we have a case. I smiled slightly. Your lawyer gets paid by the hour. You're funding a lawsuit you aren't going to win. But if you want the meeting, go ahead. I'll bring my lawyer too. Update 3. 2 weeks later, all 4 of us met in Rebecca's conference room. There was Lauren, her attorney Rebecca, me, and my lawyer Daniel. Each of us had a copy of the prenup sitting on the table. Rebecca opened the meeting. We've requested today's meeting to discuss possible revisions to the prenuptial agreement signed by my client and Mr. Ethan. Daniel looked at her. And what exactly are those revisions based on? Rebecca answered confidently. Our position is that Mr. Ethan failed to fully disclose his financial situation before the agreement was signed. At the time of negotiation, my client believed Mr. Ethan earned approximately $140,000 per year. She was never informed that he owned a business worth millions of dollars. Daniel didn't hesitate. That's simply incorrect. The prenup clearly lists Ethan's ownership of a software company. It's right here in the financial disclosure section on page 8. He slid the document across the table and pointed to the paragraph. I watched Rebecca read it. As her eyes moved across the page, I noticed her expression change ever so slightly. It says he owns a software company, she admitted. But it doesn't list the company's value. It didn't have to, Daniel replied. At the time the agreement was signed, the company had never been professionally valued. Any estimate would have been speculative. The acquisition happened well after the prenup was signed, making the later valuation legally irrelevant. Rebecca began flipping through the document while Lauren sat beside her, looking more uncomfortable with every page. And there's something else, Daniel continued. My client requested a specific clause regarding business assets. It's clause 14 on page 11. He looked around the table before reading it aloud. Any business or investment established before the marriage or created during the marriage remains the sole property of the individual who founded it, including all ownership, income, and equity associated with that business. Daniel closed the document. That provision was added at my client's request. You reviewed it, Rebecca, approved it, and your client signed it. Lauren leaned over to read the paragraph herself. I watched the color slowly drain from her face as she realized exactly what she'd agreed to. One more clause deserves attention, Daniel said. Clause 16, the financial disclosure provision, which was also added at my client's request. He continued. It clearly states that if either party intentionally hides assets or misrepresents their financial situation, the prenup becomes invalid. Ethan did no such thing. He disclosed that he owned a software company. The fact that its value increased later is not financial misrepresentation. Daniel paused for a moment before reaching into his briefcase and pulling out a folder. Now, if we're discussing financial disclosure, he said, I've also reviewed Mrs. Ethan's finances. He turned toward Lauren. Did you disclose the inheritance you received from your grandmother? The color disappeared from Lauren's face. What inheritance? Rebecca asked. Daniel answered before Lauren could. The $300,000 inheritance she received 2 years ago after her grandmother passed away. It currently sits in an investment account. That inheritance existed before the marriage and should have been listed in the prenup as a premarital asset. It wasn't. Rebecca slowly turned toward her client. Lauren, is that true? Lauren didn't say a word. If that's accurate, Daniel continued, then clause 16, the very clause my client requested, could give a court grounds to set aside the prenup because of incomplete financial disclosure. If that happened, both parties would face lengthy and expensive litigation, and the final division of assets would become far less predictable. Given the size of my client's assets, I don't believe this uncertainty benefits either side, especially not your client. Rebecca frowned. You're saying the agreement could end up hurting my client more than yours. Exactly, Daniel replied, which is why I don't believe either side has any interest in challenging it. I watched Lauren as the reality finally hit her. She'd come into that meeting hoping to tear apart the prenup so she could claim part of my money. Instead, she'd revealed an undisclosed asset of her own. By doing that, she'd created an argument that could invalidate the very agreement she'd fought so hard to get. And if that happened, I'd end up benefiting far more than she ever would. No one spoke for several long seconds. Finally, Rebecca cleared her throat. I need a few minutes alone with my client. Daniel and I stood up without saying anything and waited in the lobby. About 20 minutes later, they invited us back inside. Lauren's eyes were red. It looked like she'd been crying. Rebecca spoke in a noticeably more formal tone. My client is withdrawing her request to modify the prenuptial agreement. She acknowledges that the agreement will remain in effect as originally written. Daniel nodded. Excellent. Just so everyone is clear, he added, my client has no interest in pursuing the financial disclosure issue. As long as the prenup remains intact and neither party attempts to challenge it, he's perfectly satisfied. The meeting ended there. Lauren drove home from work separately, and I headed home on my own. When I walked into the house, she was already sitting quietly on the couch. Without looking away from me, she said, You knew about my inheritance. I did, I answered. Before signing a legal agreement, I made sure to do my homework. So yes, I knew. You could have told me. I could have. But you wanted complete financial separation. Your inheritance was your business. I had no intention of interfering with it. She looked at me for a long moment. So you kept that information as leverage? No, I replied. I kept it as protection. You wanted a prenup to protect yourself from me. I simply made sure I had the same protection from you. That's the entire purpose of a prenup. She sighed. So, what happens now? Nothing changes. The prenup stays exactly as it is. Your money remains yours. My money remains mine. Exactly the arrangement you asked for. She hesitated before asking. And if I decide I want a divorce? Then we get divorced. The prenup already explains how that works. No alimony. No fighting over assets. We each leave with what belongs to us. She sat silently, trying to absorb everything. Finally, she looked at me. You played me. I shook my head. No. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You wanted financial protection. You got it. I just made sure the protection worked both ways. That's not manipulation. That's simply being prepared. Final update. 3 months have passed since that meeting. We're still married. But our marriage doesn't feel the same anymore. There's a distance between us now that never existed before. Sometimes I catch her looking at me differently, almost like she's still trying to understand where she misread everything so badly. We still keep our finances completely separate. We still split every household expense 50-50. But there's a new understanding between us. The balance of power she believed existed never actually did. When Lauren pushed for the prenup, she honestly believed she'd always be the primary breadwinner. She assumed she was the one who needed protection. Finding out that I had substantially more assets than she did changed something deep inside our relationship. Last week, she brought up marriage counseling. I think we need to talk to someone about trust, she said. I looked at her. I haven't broken your trust. I've been honest with you from the beginning. You're the one who failed to disclose an inheritance. She frowned. You let me believe you earned less than you actually did. I never told you that. You assumed it. You never asked questions about my business. You never showed any interest in what I was building. You were focused on your own career, your own income, and protecting yourself. I respected that. So I protected myself too. She was quiet for a moment. So, where do we go from here? That decision is yours. The prenup stays. Our finances stay separate. If you want to remain married, then we stay married. If you want a divorce, then we divorce. But the financial arrangement isn't changing. She stared at me. That's it. That's all you're going to say? What else is there to say? I answered. You insisted on a prenup that would protect you from me. I made sure it protected me the exact same way. The only reason you're upset is because it turned out to work for both of us. I honestly don't know what else you expect me to say. Without another word, she went upstairs and went to bed. I stayed awake for a long time that night thinking about everything that had happened. The truth is, I'm not sure our marriage survives this. Looking back, I think Lauren wanted that prenup because she never truly trusted me. She never really saw us as equal partners. She saw me as a potential threat, someone who might someday take advantage of everything she'd worked for. Then she discovered I'd actually been more financially successful than she realized. Instead of celebrating with me, she became angry that I hadn't volunteered every detail. To me, that said everything I needed to know. The relationship stopped being about partnership. It stopped being about supporting one another. Instead, it became about control, protection, and constantly keeping score. I'm Ethan. I'm 34 years old. I married a woman who insisted on a prenup because she wanted protection from me. Then she became upset when that exact same agreement protected me just as effectively. What I learned from all of this is simple. When someone enters a marriage already focused on protecting themselves from you, they may not truly see you as their partner. They may see you as a financial risk. Maybe Lauren was right to think that way, because thanks to the prenup she fought so hard to get, if our marriage eventually falls apart, and right now I think it probably will, we'll each leave with exactly what we earned. Nothing more, nothing less. That's the deal she wanted. And in the end, that's exactly the deal she got. Edit 1. A lot of people have asked whether I intentionally hid the value of my business. The answer is no. I disclosed that I owned a software company in the prenup paperwork. Lauren never asked about revenue, valuation, or ownership percentages. I wasn't required to volunteer information she never requested. If that information mattered to her, her attorney should have asked for it during negotiations. Edit 2. Several people also asked about the inheritance. Yes, I knew it existed before we signed the prenup. I did my homework before entering a legal agreement. During the prenup process, my attorney hired a forensic accountant to verify both of our financial disclosures. That's when we discovered the inheritance account that hadn't been listed. I never mentioned it because the prenup Lauren wanted already kept premarital assets completely separate. Her inheritance belonged to her. My business belonged to me. The inheritance only became relevant after she tried to attack the prenup using the financial disclosure clause. Edit 3. For everyone wondering whether we're getting divorced. Honestly, I still don't know. Right now we're living in a strange limbo. Legally, we're husband and wife, but financially we feel more like roommates sharing a house. Ever since the meeting with her lawyer, Lauren has become noticeably distant. Sometimes I wonder if she's trying to decide whether staying married to someone whose money she can never access is better than walking away and being single. If that's really what she's weighing, it's a pretty sad foundation for any marriage.